What's up, Florida State sports fans? Welcome back to another episode of Seminole Sidelines. Curt Weiler, Osceola senior writer, here with Florida State baseball radio voice Eric Luallen, back from Corvallis. He had the bags packed for Omaha. He was ready for a long road trip. We thought that series was going to come right down to the Super Regional, going to be like the thinnest of margins, and I think it's definitely the case. But unfortunately, no second straight Omaha trip for the Seminoles, Lulu.
Yeah, I was packed for that long too. We were the plan was if we won that out there, we weren't coming home. We were just going to go straight to Omaha. So had to pack for hopefully an extended trip, and unfortunately that didn't happen. But you had a super regional between a couple of good teams, and certainly I think Oregon State is a team that's got the parts to go out there to Omaha and win that whole thing. So it'll be interesting to watch them and see how they fare out there.
We don't need to revisionist history to that point. I think that was a matchup of two of the best 8 teams. Like, to me, that series and a lot of how this postseason played out of those two teams probably should have been top 8 seeds along with Coastal.
No, I don't disagree with you. You wonder about Oregon State just from a standpoint of not having played in a conference. Mm-hmm. Obviously, we don't see them much around here when you start flipping around channels to get to games that would normally be on the various networks that we normally might watch. So between all that, it was hard to kind of figure how to take them. But when you watch them on film and you watch some of their games, you could see that there was a lot of talent on that team. And like I said, I don't think that I don't think they were underrated. I don't think they were overrated. I think that having them as the number 8 seed was, I think that was a good place for them. That's a talented baseball team, lineup that's got danger in it top to bottom, plenty of arms, both as starters and out of the bullpen. So again, with this field being what it is right now in Omaha this year, I do think that's a team that's got a very good shot.
Well, and that's what makes Florida State not being there maybe extra tough to swallow, is we didn't think it was one or two dominant teams this year, and you look at Omaha Field and you kind of feel the same way. But let's talk a little about the Oregon State series. I do think that team is quite good. I thought they were coming in, and they showed that, especially I would say on Sunday. But for large swaths of that series, I mean, the pitching staff did a really good job shutting them down. I mean, in position to win on Friday, a great team performance on Saturday. And then, I mean, just it's hard not to feel like Friday's the one that got away with how Sunday played out. But, I mean, how nice was it to see? I mean, you expected what you saw on Saturday from Jamie Arnold, but Joey Vellini bouncing back like he did and giving them what he did in that game 1.
Yeah, it was good to see. And, not really that surprised by it. I do think, and Link talked about this the last couple of weeks, that maybe Vellini had gotten a little worn down. He'd never pitched anywhere near what he ended up pitching this year. He was a guy at USF that he missed all of the 23 season due to an injury. 24, he was used mostly out of the bullpen. I don't think he got even to 40 innings last year at USF. So that's a big change in workload for him. And, you look at Wes Mendez, and I think you could say the same about Wes Mendez too. I think he hit a little patch there during the season where maybe that workload had caught up to him. And again, he's a guy that coming off a freshman year at Ole Miss, he hadn't really ever had the kind of innings that he pitched this year. So I think you can say that about both of them, but I don't think I'm that surprised that he got a little bit of rest and was able to have that kind of outing. I still felt like, and I even said it in the top of the 9th inning on Sunday, I felt like if we could have gotten Bailey up there, if you get Bailey up in that situation, Lodis is up, there's 2 outs. If you get Bailey up in that situation, he is the tying run. And I felt like if they got to him in that situation, that they were going to make that happen. They were at least going to come and tie it and send that past the top half of the 9th inning. And we just weren't able to do that. And you can argue all you want about the call there on Lodis on the called third strike. But I just kind of felt like you get Lodis on, you get Max on, you get to Miles, and good things were going to happen.
Well, and like the butterfly effect changes that game. Certainly if it plays out that way, but they lose that Sunday game 14-10. And you think about the grand slam that Alex Lodis missed by feet in the 6th inning of that game, where he came up with the bases loaded and just missed it. And It was crazy. I mean, the balls, like Miles was the only guy who got a ball out in the first two games, right? It was a lot of ball. It felt really hard to get him out. And then the ball was flying out on Sunday, but Florida State could never get the big hit in that big moment.
Yeah, and I don't know what, and again, not knowing enough about Corvallis, like I know what time of year and what the weather is like, what the ball's going to do at Hauser. Look, we've been around there a long time. We all know that. It's hard for me to understand the difference between Sunday's weather and Saturday and Friday and even Thursday when we went there and practiced, because the ball just did not carry at all. And the wind each one of those first 3 days was blowing out to right at about 7-8 miles an hour. There wasn't that much of a different wind on Sunday. The temperature was warmer. It was not as humid. It was, 94, 95 degrees with probably 40% humidity compared to 86 with about 50% humidity on Friday. The wind was blowing at a slightly different direction, but it wasn't that much stronger. Instead of 7-8 degrees, it was 8 to 9 degrees, and it was blowing out to right center, maybe center field. So I'm not sure what the difference was, but there was a huge difference in how that ball carried on Sunday, again, compared to the rest of the week that we were there.
Yeah, I mean, I think they scored 6 total runs in the first two games, and I mean, 4 or 5 of those came in the last 2 innings on Friday. I mean, the pitching staff as a whole, I mean, you hate it for a guy like Joe Charles, who was so important down the stretch and was like, frankly, are they there? Are they in that round? If he hadn't become the reliable kind of closer that he had been really the last month of the season, and just whether it was, he just like was worn down with how many pitches he was at, or whether, I mean, you just tip your cap to a good lineup, whatever it may be. I mean, you hate that that's how that guy's Florida State career came to an end with those 2 appearances after he had such a great story.
Yeah, and Joe's a great guy. Everything that he went throughout his entire career, not just his time at Florida State, but even before arriving at FSU, you certainly do hate to see that. And he's one of the good guys. He's a hard worker. I really thought, and I don't think it's a case of him getting worn down. I just think sometimes that happens in baseball. And certainly Joe had worked past the 2 1/3 mark in games before. He'd thrown that many pitches before. So I don't really think it's any of those things. I think it's just something that happens in baseball from time to time.
It's an imperfect game.
Yep.
I mean, you talked about, and we can talk about, I mean, Wes Mendez on Sunday is another, like, are you in that situation if he didn't become as reliable as he was down the stretch? But I think it's tough for his first season, a really good season, a season where, like you said, he went through that slump period, and he really, I thought, worked out of it, and he probably at that point had thrown more innings than he ever had, and had to work past that, and seemed to work past that. Was coming off a career best start against Mississippi State, and then doesn't make it out of the first inning, and it just felt like the command wasn't all the way there, and because the command on the off speed wasn't there, they're able to sit on fastballs, and it's just, that's not going to go well against that level of hitter. I guess reflect on, I mean, maybe a little how it ended, but I mean more Wes's entire season, because that's a guy who enters the offseason as quite possibly a Friday starter candidate next year.
Yeah, and he's a legit. It's not just because you might be losing Jamie Arnold and Joey Vellini both. I mean, from a standpoint of the stuff, he's got the stuff of a Friday starter. So he's got the profile of that type of pitcher. He certainly is going to get a lot of attention as far as the preseason list, the draft list, all of those things that are going to come out prior to the start of the 26th season. He's going to get a lot of attention, and it's going to be well deserved. The kid certainly has a package that you're going to like as a team that has him as one of their starters, or as a pro scout that's looking for guys and looking to try to figure out who he's going to take when the draft comes around. All of those things make him a very attractive player for you. So it's going to be fun. I don't know what his summer plans are. I haven't seen yet a comprehensive list of where everybody's going this summer. So I don't know where he's planning to go. I don't know if he's planning to pitch this summer or if he's going to just take some time off and rest. Again, going back to the workload and what he faced this year compared to his entire career before this. It wouldn't surprise me at all if he's one that just kind of takes the summer off. But you look at that little lull he went through. There were some weeks in there, some starts in there where he was 90 to 92, and then all of a sudden you see him bump back up to 92 to 95 the last few times out. It certainly makes you think that what you're going to get at the start of the season next year is going to be worthy of that Friday spot if that's where he ends up.
It's 100%. Like you said, it is an important role. I mean, you're going to lose Jamie. Joey is an interesting question, frankly, where like obviously this is the last year of leverage for him, where if he comes back next year, his signing bonus would be depleted just as a senior who doesn't have anywhere else to go next year. But the case could be like, can the case be made of where is his draft stock now and how much could he potentially help, like being a starter for another full year and kind of like showing more of a track record? That is an interesting one where you wonder if in the NIL world, maybe a difference of some sort can be created there.
Well, and you also have to think with Vellini, he's 22. He'll be 23 in December. So what does that do to his desire to get the professional baseball career started if that opportunity presents itself? But also, what does that do to teams that are thinking about taking Joey Vellini when it comes draft time? Because that, you're a redshirt junior, you're already by definition a little bit past that window that the scouts really like, a third-year guy and so on. And then a 20, almost 23-year-old pitcher, again, I think there are lots of questions there as far as how that goes. And you bring up a good point, because this is something that has really crossed my mind a lot here, really over the past few months of this season, with NIL becoming what it is in baseball, where it's not just, guys earning some pocket change, where there's some real money being thrown around. How many of these guys that are kind of, when you start talking about guys that are in that 11th to 20th round window as far as draft pick goes, unless a team wants to overspend on them, you're talking about a signing bonus limit of about $150,000. You're talking about then limits now that are much higher from a salary standpoint in minor league baseball than they used to be, but it's still not, you're not going out there and making six figures playing in single A ball. How many NIL deals might keep guys from reconsidering taking $150,000 as a 15th round pick and then riding a bus around and making your, $25,000 or whatever it is that you might make? How many guys will reconsider that as a viable option and decide to come back and play more college baseball? Let's talk about it. The lack of rounds now in the draft since COVID. We used to have 50 rounds, then we dropped to 40. After COVID, we dropped from 40 to 20. So now there are just 20 rounds. So there are a lot fewer guys that are getting drafted. So you have a lot more guys in the college game now. And he's talked about the talent level of the college game being something that we've never seen before. How much will NIL now play into that? And how much will that keep guys that would take the money and go and turn pro, keep them in the college game for an extra year? I think that's going to be something that will be very interesting to watch over the next few years.
That minor league bus life probably makes your commercial flight life that y'all are on most of the time feel a lot better.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Yeah, the bus life is really something. And it's funny, you talk to some of those guys that go off and they start living that life, and it's not the glamour that they think it is. It is a means to an end, and if you're going to get to that ultimate goal, you have to do it. I remember back in the fall, Jaime Ferrer, Cam Smith, and James Tibbs were all out at one of the first fall scrimmages, and all three of them were like, "Look, if I could just not do fall practice, I'd come back and play in a heartbeat." I wouldn't even hesitate to think about it, because it's the life that they live when they're in college is so much more fun and games, even though it's work time. But there's more fun to it than when you're actually doing it for a living and when you're working at it. So that's going to be, I think, an interesting aspect of this. That in baseball, the different rules. You don't have to declare for the draft, so you don't have to put your eligibility on the line by declaring for the draft like you do in football. So it's really kind of, you get the opportunity to weigh and measure what you're going to put yourself through with different opportunities and with different options than you do in maybe football, where you have to make a declaration that then is either going to end or prolong your college career.
I want to ask a little about the guys that we're thinking they're going to lose, some guys coming back, but I should ask, you brought them up. Probably one of a few people who was thrilled to see Florida State out in Corvallis was James Tibbs. I know he made it to that game. Did he play a game like Sunday afternoon and then make it over? I saw you catch up with him briefly. I guess, how was it seeing James? How did he say he's doing?
Yeah, it was good seeing him. Always going to be one of the favorites that I've gotten to deal with here. Good kid, good family. So it was good to see him, and I'm not the least bit surprised that he made that trek up there. That guy's FSU through and through. Just like it wasn't a surprise to when Cam Smith hopped on a train in West Palm and came down to Coral Gables to see the Seminoles play there. Same thing. Those guys bleed garnet and gold. So when they had an opportunity, when we were somewhere close to them, they both went out of their way to get there, and not at all surprised by that. It was good to see him. Even though I didn't get a chance to chat with him for too long, but it was good to get a chance to at least chat with him for a little bit.
Another guy, quite a few guys, I would say, but another guy who's going to be joining those pro ranks soon, and as a pretty high draft pick, obviously, is Jamie Arnold. And I think you could talk about it. It is a shame when you see a guy like Jamie's career not end in Omaha. He got one trip there, which is great, and was a part of, took Tennessee to the limit in that game one, nearly put Florida State on a really good path there. But what are your reflections of Jamie's career? It feels like he was held to astronomically high expectations this season and finished the year with another sub-3 ERA. And it feels like some people still weren't entirely happy or satisfied with it. I guess, what are your reflections on Jamie, what he's meant in his time here?
Well, it was an interesting year from that aspect. I know Link and I talked about it a number of times, both on the air and off the air, just those expectations on Jamie and what that, Link said, look, I never had to deal with this as a player. And honestly, you have to go back to a guy like Paul Wilson to find somebody at Florida State who did deal with those type of expectations. We all had high expectations of Cam Smith last year and James Tibbs, but it was never number one pick talk. And again, that's a whole different world that you're talking about there when you start talking about a guy who's getting mentioned that frequently and with such lofty expectations. And it had to be tough on him when you have that type of expectation on somebody. The time demands that are made of somebody like that can be overwhelming. And I thought he handled it really well. I thought he was outstanding this year, save for, a little bit of time there in the middle of the season where he just kind of lost a little bit of that feel for his fastball and had a couple of starts there where he struggled to get the fastball over, and that affected everything else. But he was able to get that back pretty quickly, and they figured it out, and he was obviously very, very good there at the end of the season. He's going to be a fun one to watch. Obviously, there's a little bit of a more special connection there for me because he's from my high school. His dad is a little bit younger than I am. We didn't go to school at the same time, but he's not that far removed from me. Like I was friends with guys that he played with. So, as you pass those guys down the line, some of the younger guys I played with were the older guys that he played with. So, we had a lot of mutual friends. My best friend in high school coached him for a little while there at Jesuit. So, there's a little bit of a different connection there for me with Jamie than maybe some of the other guys that have come through here. But it's been fun to watch him. It's been fun to watch the jump that he made from his freshman year when he was thrown into kind of you threw him into the beginning of that season as a Sunday guy when maybe what would have been best for his development would be a lesser role and not maybe relying on him as a weekend starter, but we kind of were forced to. in that situation because how thin the pitching staff was at that point. So it's been fun to watch him navigate his way through a really tough season, both personally and as a team, with what we had in 2023, to turn around and become what he was last year at the beginning of the season and then throughout, and then to continue that this year has been really a lot of fun to watch. To experience it while getting to spend as much time as I did with his parents and then experience it through their eyes as well has been pretty cool too.
Another guy, maybe more of a surprise this season, but another guy who it sounds like is in the first round consideration is Alex Lodis. I mean, I think is it 10 days from now? I think it's entirely possible he wins the Golden Spikes, becomes, I think, the fifth Florida State Seminole, first since Buster Posey to win the Golden Spikes. He's one of 3 finalists right now. What was your perspective? I mean, being there for and being having a role. I mean, obviously he gave you the iconic call in the Florida game. I'm sure tons of others, but the Alex Lodis season. And I mean, can you remember kind of a jump like this from one year to next from a hitter?
Yeah, the comparison I've made is Tony Thomas from his sophomore to junior year back in 2006 to 2007. Tony came in as a freshman, set the single season strikeout record, and went from being I want to say without looking it up, I want to say his sophomore year, he was, 250, 260, somewhere in that range. And then legitimately National Player of the Year in 2007. So he made that huge jump from 6 to 7. And I think Lodis has been similar to that. I think with Alex, obviously it's been a different path where he went to University of North Florida and was a freshman All-American. But then, most guys, they have to go from high school to make that adjustment to college. And then you make that adjustment and then you see like this line that goes at a reasonably level line upwards as you grow through your career. But then he had to make another adjustment in going from the University of North Florida and the level of play that they have there to Florida State and the Atlantic Coast Conference. And so now there's another adjustment period that a lot of guys don't have to make when they get to college. So it was cool to see that jump that he made. And I asked Link about it a couple of times throughout the course of the year. And he's one that, while I think a lot of people would be surprised at what Alex was able to accomplish this year, Link has never been one of those people. Link has said all along that, this is exactly what I expected out of him because I've watched him work. I've watched him prepare. I've watched him in the clubhouse. I've watched him out on the field and do all of the things that you need to do to be that good. So Link was one who was never surprised by it.
From some guys, I guess, who are moving on to I think a guy who's going to be a big piece of the team next year. I do want to talk a little Miles Bailey. I looked up his stats the other day. I tweeted it out. From his last 9 games of his freshman season, that's what starts with the regular season finale against UNC, then the ACC tournament, the regional, and the super regional. He was 16 for 33. That's 45 with 8 homers, 19 RBI, 13 runs, 11 walks, and 7 strikeouts. He had an OBP of 614 and he slugged 1273. Yeah. Obviously, that's not sustainable over the course of an entire season. There are always going to be the peaks and valleys, but it seemed like he really found something down the stretch of this season. I guess, what do you think a full offseason can do for him, and kind of how do you tamper expectations when it feels like they're going to be so high for him going into a draft-eligible sophomore year?
Yeah, Link and I talked about this too. I said, it's funny because he's going to be a draft-eligible sophomore. We just went through Cam Smith, and we kind of saw that career arc for Cam Smith. And I said, when you look at Cam's numbers freshman year compared to what Miles Bailey has done, they're not even in the same realm. Nope. And one of the things he said, but they came from different times, which makes it sound like one of them was playing baseball in the 1800s. But you had Cam coming out of high school, coming off of a COVID year, coming off of COVID that really kind of disrupted his high school career, his high school development, all of those things. So Miles might have been a little bit ahead of where Cam was going into a freshman campaign. But, you bring up how good he was at the end of that season. In April, I think the month of April, he hit 222. And then from May 1st through the end of the season, I want to say it was up around 390, 395 for the last month and almost month and a half, basically. So, man, he just got into that zone where it was such a tough out. And really, realistically, like I remember looking at this before the ACC tournament, and it might even been before the North Carolina series, thinking that he had a legitimate shot of breaking Elijah Cabell's record for most strikeouts in a single season.
Yeah. And
he ends up not even coming close to it because he was that good those last 3-4 weeks of the season where he wasn't striking out at a high rate anymore, and he didn't even end up approaching that record. So, it was really a remarkable last 6 weeks of the season for Miles Bailey. I did see the other day, I guess he's been invited for Team USA for tryouts for the Team USA collegiate team. So he'll be involved in that. I think he was going to head to the Cape. So he should have a really interesting summer, regardless of what happens. If he makes that team, he'll be playing with the collegiate Team USA. If he doesn't, he'll be headed up to the Cape.
Yeah, it's. I remember I remarked to a few times people in the press box down the stretch of the season. I was like, when did Miles Bailey become like one of the most disciplined hitters on this team? Like it felt like by the end of the year, he was on top of the power he has, working amongst the most walks. And like it's a scary duality for one hitter to have.
Well, and he ended up, I want to say, and I can look this up and tell you exactly, but I want to say he ended up beating out Gage Harrelson for most walks on the team.
He's 3 behind him, it looks like. I see 35.
3 behind. Okay, they were kind of neck and neck there through the last few games. So
did Gage have a 2 or 3 walk game? I think in the Super that might have like been the difference, basically. But
yeah.
But it goes to show that there was a big disparity there for a while. Gage was probably far and away the most walks on the team for a while there, right. and Miles really closed that gap down the stretch of the season.
Well, then you had the top 3 on the team in on-base percentage at the end of the season were Lodis, Harrelson, and Miles Bailey, which is really, it's really something when you think about it. Again, after you go through that April and see him hit 222,
yep.
It's really remarkable that he ends the season as one of the top 3 on the team in on-base percentage.
I definitely like last year. It's definitely they're in a spot again where we've talked about Jamie, we've talked about Alex Lodis, we've talked about we don't know about Bellini. I think Max Williams likely to be gone. I think Gage likely to be gone. I think who am I missing? Drew Farrow. I would say it's probably all those juniors. Just where like there's not much incentive for those guys to come back for their senior seasons in the way the draft is currently set up. But I guess just how it feels hard not to have confidence in the job that Link and Micah and Ty and Brad, the staff, are going to do. When you look at what they did last year at Placing Talent, it's hard not to feel confident about they're just going to be able to replenish to a certain degree and be back in a similar spot next year.
Well, yeah, and you bring up those guys, between Max, Gage, Lodis, and Farrow, your second and short, your center fielder, your right fielder. I think all 4 of those guys have probably played their last game at Florida State. I would expect all 4 of them to be taken in the top 5 rounds.
Yeah,
I'll be very surprised if any of those 4 are still around after the 5th round. And you're just not going to, again, even in the world of NIL, I just don't think it behooves you, if your goal is to play in the major leagues, to come back and play a senior year again under those circumstances. And certainly there are outliers that you can use to show that that's not the case, but those are outliers. And that's not generally, you don't generally improve things for yourself by coming back for a senior year. You might improve where you get picked. You don't improve the money. And the other thing that I don't know that people really understand about baseball, a lot of your ability to advance through a system has to do with how much money they've got tied up in you. If they've got $50,000 tied up in one guy and $500,000 tied up in another guy, and those guys are performing at the same level, guess who's going to get those advancement opportunities quicker? It's going to be the guy that they've got more money tied up in. If they have to make a roster move, a lot of times the roster move is going to come down to who do we have more money invested in, because that's where their interest lies in trying to develop that player. So when you're picked in those areas, and I know James Ramsey can be a big example of coming back for a senior year and having things really fall into place, where he was able to turn himself from the 20th round into a first round pick. But again, that's an outlier. That's not the normal progression. So I really wouldn't expect any of those 4 guys to be back. So you've got to, do you have a replacement for those 4 guys on your current roster, or do you have to go out and find them? And now you've got the transfer portal to be able to go out and make those finds. I think obviously for Florida State, it was good to get Faroe and Lodis when you did get them after their freshman year. So you have them for a couple of years. Gage Harrelson was same with Max Williams. Gage Harrelson was a tremendous pickup this past year out of the transfer portal. Again, that there's nothing to me that tells me that's going to suddenly stop. These guys, they know how that stuff functions. They know how it works. They've done a good job with it the last couple of years. So I would anticipate that this is going to be that they will again be able to find the pieces that they need between what they've got on their roster coming back and what they're able to find in the transfer portal or incoming from the junior college ranks, wherever it might be. I think they'll find the pieces they need to field another team that, we're still talking in June about what that team can be.
Lulu, you've been buried in baseball for 4 or 5 months. It's finally, I guess, over for the time being. Are you still glued to your TV this weekend watching the World Series, or are you like, when Florida State's not in it, when you've had that long season, are you like over baseball in the moment?
It really depends. There isn't a standard answer for that, and it's usually not something that hits me until I think the first time that I really just tuned out postseason completely was 2 years ago. We weren't involved in it. There was no question about it. There was no getting amped up for it. We just weren't in the postseason, and I kind of tuned it out. I was for Super Regionals. I was in St. Martin.
We were all over that season.
Yeah,
we were all over that season.
I didn't watch 1 minute of Super Regionals that year because I wasn't even in the country. So there weren't a lot of places showing Super Regional baseball in the Caribbean. So that one was one where I just completely tuned out. Sometimes I'll be glued to it and I'll watch every minute of it, and other times I'll watch a couple of games and then I'll decide that I'm kind of over it and I'm done with baseball. I can't tell you what it is that triggers that, but that's just kind of how it goes. I'll watch a couple of games and then either I'll keep watching or I won't.
How's that feel this year? And I guess who do you like of the 8 teams there? Who do you think wins?
I don't know how it feels. Like I said, it'll be one of those things where I tune in and watch a game and I'll either keep watching or I'll
fair enough
click to something else and I'll tune it out. I do think Oregon State's got a very good shot. Obviously, you've got the 2 favorites are probably LSU and Arkansas, but they're in the same bracket.
Yeah.
So from a standpoint of how somebody might handicap the field, those are probably the 2 teams that people would say are the strongest, but one of those is not going to get out of that bracket and have a shot in a championship game. So, I think you're probably on the one side, you've got to figure that either Arkansas or LSU gets out of that side. And I wouldn't be at all surprised to see like an Arkansas-Oregon State final or an LSU-Oregon State final. That wouldn't surprise me in the least bit.
LSU Arkansas, not only are they on the same side, they have their opening game Saturday night. Like they play each other game 1. And so like one of them immediately has 1 loss and a tough path out of the loser's bracket. And it kind of like puts their run almost on life support. Lulu, greatly appreciate the time as always. I think you've been a great resource for us down the stretch of the season. And we always appreciate your insights.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it like always.
Appreciate you all for watching, for listening to the podcast. I'm sure we'll have a little more baseball stuff as some more portal commits pop up. They have 1 right now. I imagine they'll have more in the days and weeks to come. And it's it feels like it's going to be more of a restock than a rebuild or anything like that. That kind of feels like where it is right now with Link Jarrett. But appreciate it very much. Thanks, Lulu, for taking the time. We will talk to you soon.